Imagine your mind unraveling. Your thoughts cannot fully form. Your pattern of thinking is corrupted. You begin to say things involuntarily, horrible things you never meant to say. Urges and compunctions to do terrible things seem overwhelming. You must use your utmost will to stop it. Fatigue sets in as you seem to be wrestling with thoughts and urges that are not your own all of the time. Your consciousness fades in and out, and in those blank spaces, others tell you that you are doing odd and frightening things. You go to a doctor, and there is nothing biologically wrong with you. You even begin to harm yourself, and disembodied voices begin to encourage you to do more. Around you, people eventually tell you to do something that even the mention of irritates you. Find spiritual counseling. These ailments are not unusual and have been reported by people of all faiths across all time. In Christian tradition, someone experiencing these ailments would probably be considered demonically possessed. A demon being a fallen angel or related hellish spiritual entity that is seeking the downfall of mankind on behalf of their overlord, Satan. Demonic possession has a very well-established tradition in the Catholic Church that traces its roots thousands of years ago to the time of Jesus Christ, who is claimed to be the greatest exorcist, one who casts out demons from the afflicted. The exorcist today is an established profession within the Catholic Church. The International Association of Exorcists has around 900 members worldwide in 58 countries. Exorcists are, according to the Church, the witnesses, the voice, and the ambassadors of Christ and of the Church to those suffering because of the evil one. This viewpoint of humans suffering at the hands of a demonic other from a hellish realm is well established in people's minds, especially because that is the way countless Hollywood films have portrayed the phenomena. However, what if there was another way to see the phenomena spiritually, one that is different from the way Rome and Hollywood wishes to define it? In Japan, there are many who see these demons not as a hellish entity, but rather as the corrupted souls of their ancestors. Yoshida Sensei claimed that he, his wife, and family were afflicted by such corrupted souls from their family. These entities were said to have hounded, tormented, tortured, and even ended the lives of members of his family. To him, exorcism was not a combative exercise between the forces of good and evil, but rather an act of karmic purification through which the souls of both the living and the dead were saved. My name is Laura, and you are watching The Paranormal Scholar. In 1969, Yoshida Sensei was a prominent bureaucrat who worked on writing university entrance exams for the Ministry of Education in Nakayama, Japan. In his spare time, he would tour the country, giving lectures on human relations to audiences, often under the aegis of the Red Cross. During one of these lectures, a member of his audience developed a severe toothache that suddenly left his whole face swollen. The pain caused a scene, but, luckily for him, one of the other members of the audience was a devotee of Mahikari. This was a new and burgeoning religious movement that originated in Japan in 1959. Mahikari roughly translates to true light, and is a religion that seemingly syncretized Eastern and Western religious and esoteric thought into one belief system. One of their most extraordinary assertions is that anyone can do miracles and channel divine light through them to heal sicknesses, purify, and exorcise demons. This can be done by raising your hands up over a person and using prayer and meditation to allow divine light to flow through you and onto the afflicted person. One of the terms used to describe this action is okiyomi. That day in 1969, the Mahikari member put their hands over the man's swollen face and performed okiyomi. Before an astonished crowd and Yoshida, the swelling immediately went down. Yoshida Sensei remained skeptical, but the experience piqued his interest in the new religion. He started attending their lectures and after a while became convinced. Thus, he became a full member of their church and received an amulet which would help him give okiyomi to others. Yoshida described the initiation as a transformative moment and felt as though he was walking on clouds during his purification. However, when Yoshida started to try to purify his wife, it seemed to awaken something dreadful lingering within her. As Yoshida would administer Okiyomi to her, she described feeling a fist-sized lump moving around her body, seemingly trying to escape the light. As she attended one of the 3-day lectures at the church, she was bothered the entire time by a dreadfully cold sensation in her hips and had to be constantly encumbered by pillows just to keep warm. When she received the amulet, the cold sensation went away, to be soon replaced by more horrific symptoms. On their way home from the ceremony, she developed flu-like symptoms, and when she got home, she realized that she had lost control of her bowels. Initially, she thought these symptoms were signs that she was being cleansed of whatever evil was in her. A rash then developed on her skin where the amulet was, with an evil-smelling pus emanating from the sores. She at first gave thanks for the sores, but when they would not go away, she put some talcum powder on it, which only made the rash worse. She apologized to the divine for her lack of faith, and the rash went away. Soon after this incident, their son developed strange symptoms too, particularly in his foot, which the local doctor diagnosed as polio and recommended 6 months of electrotherapy. The family at this point decided to speak to the local Mahikari minister about the ailment, who said that it was not polio, but rather a warning from their ancestors to move the family's ancestral shrine away from the top of their filing cabinet, as they considered that to be disrespectful. In due course, they moved the shrine, and Okiyomi was administered on Yoshida's son's foot, and they claim he was very quickly cured of polio. At this point in the narrative, it is important to stress that the Yoshidas were not people initially averse to medicine. They had been a well-off family that for many generations had profited and believed in every aspect of their society. It was after the badly managed death of his father and death of his daughter, which Yoshida believed had something to do with medical negligence, that he drifted towards the more esoteric forms of healing. And so, Okiyomi had become routine in Yoshida's household, and whilst they claimed many benefits, it did seem to exacerbate spiritual turmoil. One time, as Yoshida was purifying his wife, she began to draw circles with her hands, a sign that she was possessed by a malevolent spirit. He began to question this spirit, who, after interrogation, admitted to being his uncle, who had ended his own life as a young boy at school by jumping from a train at Uchida Station in the city. It was believed not just by Yoshida but by others also that the boy had become a yibakuri, a sort of Japanese poltergeist bound to a specific location that possesses supernatural abilities to inflict harm and cause havoc. By the time it appeared to Yoshida's wife, it claimed to have been a practiced killer, sensationally claiming to have already taken the lives of several others as a ghost. For over a year, they tried to exorcise this malevolent entity, to no avail. It would just keep appearing in the form of something very strange, a demonic sort of badger inside of Yoshida's wife that was determined to take her life. According to the spirit, it was trying to do this by tactically inflicting a sense of disorientation and dizziness. One time, he claimed to have almost attained his end when he caused her to become dizzy as she was riding her bicycle over a bridge. As the uncle had died from falling onto a train, it seemed that he had, after death, the supernatural ability to inflict that same sensation of falling onto others. The idea of karma here is very important. The notion that an act or feeling is not transitory, but rather imprints itself upon your soul and becomes part of your spirit's very long journey. Author Winston Davis refers to this type of phenomena as homeopathic possession, as in there is a like produces like aspect to the possession. Someone that fell is trying to cause someone else to fall. The role of the exorcist in these situations is to redress the karmic imbalance, through an act of respect or otherwise that serves to unbind the initial act which so aggrieved and caused a spirit to become malevolent, to, in a sense, heal its perturbed soul, basically making the poltergeist snap out of it. At this point, failing to exorcise his uncle's perturbed spirit, Yoshida consulted a more senior member of their church, who advised them to go to the spot where his uncle had died and give offerings. Determined to do so at every spot they suspected he had died at the train station, Yoshida planned a daily pilgrimage for a week to the very station to bring his uncle's spirit peace. In a remarkable synchronicity, on the first day of his pilgrimage, he met an old man who not only knew about the incident, but had actually held the young boy as he died in his arms many years prior. He pointed them to the exact spot, and so they placed many offerings there and prayed for the uncle's spirit to attain peace. After this, Yoshida performed okiyomi on his wife, and it is claimed that the uncle's spirit appeared before them, but rather this time as a normal human boy, repenting and giving thanks. He apologized for all his misdeeds, including apparently having given Yoshida's wife's grandfather cancer. After this confession, he disappeared to the astral world and, presumably, found peace. Whilst a year-long struggle to exorcise a demonic uncle from trying to murder his wife might seem like the climax of Yoshida's spiritual struggle, it was merely a prelude. In fact, the family's actions seemed to open the doors for distant ancestors to come and possess the body of Yoshida's wife and torment her with illnesses and afflictions. His family had a long history in the area as lance masters for their local lord at Nakayama Castle. In this position, they were wealthy, but also had a violent history, and thus had a weighty karmic imbalance. Yoshida could not even recognize many of the spirits who came through. One he did recognize, however, was his great-great-grandfather, a man who had done many nasty deeds in his life, one of which was to curse his own family. During this man's life, he had many servants, and one day he impregnated one of them. When the infant was born, realizing the shame it would bring upon his position and family, he took the child's life. This act supposedly transformed the infant into a vengeful poltergeist that would periodically come and take the lives of Yoshida's family members. Most recently, his own father had claimed to have been taken by this wrathful entity. Now, the very same being was inhabiting his wife, aiming to do the same to end her life in order to make him suffer. Through their church and by using the practice of okiyomi, it was claimed that they were able to exorcise these malevolent ancestral entities. Another one that was said to have been particularly nasty and incredibly personal was the spirit of Yoshida's own father, which, again, is said to have possessed his wife. Apparently, he was aggrieved because he wanted to die at home, and his son had let him die at the hospital. In his wrath, he had caused the sickness of their daughter and, horrifically, induced her to lose her life at the very same hospital, in the very same room where he had died. Whilst in the fits of being possessed by him, Yoshida's wife cried out, "It was I who took the life of your daughter. I knew it was wrong to make her sick, but in the other world I was lonely and in agony." It's harrowing and impossible to imagine that those words could have come out easily from a mother's mouth. And yet, according to their testimonies, they did. The father was supposedly also aggrieved that his son had been selling off ancestral farmlands. Yoshida recalled how he had tremendous trouble throughout all his business dealings in regards to the land, and this was allegedly caused by his father's vengeful spirit. After much purification and deep, tearful conversations, Yoshida and his father are said to have found peace with one another. During the day of final benediction, Yoshida called in his sisters, and they all said farewell to the spirit of their father, and he, like the others, went off into the astral realm to find peace. After being taken to the brink of death and back, these spiritual exorcisms profoundly affected Yoshida and his family. Indeed, after it was all done, it even inspired them to set up a purification temple in the area to help treat others going through similar afflictions. The temple grew in membership and became a font of spiritual holiness in the area, with people claiming its mere presence had reduced the number of traffic accidents and even made typhoons avoid the location. There are many ways to view what happened to Yoshida and his family. To Western ears, what happened to Yoshida's wife may seem too bizarre to even be contemplated by both believers and skeptics. Some may well say that they were demons pretending to be family members. After all, why would there be so many and so suddenly? This line of thought, however, ignores famous Christian exorcisms, such as the ones undertaken by Father Reisinger in the early 20th century on Anna Eklund, where billions and billions of devils were said to have been exorcised and locked up in hell. According to Yoshida's belief system and wider traditional Japanese thought, a look into the karmic legacy of her family would have been much more beneficial to exorcising Anna Eklund. Then, of course, there are the endless mental gymnastics performed by skeptics in order to conjure words including fugue, hysteria, and perhaps even simpleton. That Yoshida's wife was merely suffering from something of her own imagination or psychological trauma, without ever pinpointing to an exact cause or reason. And whilst we should not entertain ungrounded, overly skeptical perspectives, it is still important to consider psychological factors in this case. After all, even if they didn't directly cause the spiritual manifestations, they may have exacerbated them. For example, the loss of Yoshida's daughter would have undoubtedly affected both him and his wife in a deep and difficult to understand manner. It is, of course, unnatural for you to outlive your child. Could it be that in her grief, Yoshida's wife saw blaming her death on the perturbed and malevolent spirit of her father-in-law as a way to make sense of her grief? That is, of course, not to undermine the wider happenings of this case, but merely to provide an alternative perspective that makes sense of and validates the deeply personal and traumatic experiences of the family. Add to this that their daughter passed in the very same room as the father. It could be that this was an act of sense-making that accounted for this traumatic and unexpected factor in the case. It must be stated that in grief, people will think and do all manner of things in order to come to terms with their loss. Of course, that is not to say that what happened to the Yoshida family was an imagining of Yoshida's wife's grieving mind. Indeed, the scale, scope, and physical ailments suggest otherwise, suggest that there was some sort of supernatural, preternatural element. And so, regardless, whilst the trappings may be different, the symptoms suffered by Yoshida's wife would be recognizable to any Christian exorcist. Unknown ailments, speaking with other people's voices, and mysterious knowledge of events and people. Even the cold she experienced around her hips can be said to be similar to many people who experience malevolent hauntings, with the notion of temperature changes, particularly cold spots, being commonplace. Malevolent spiritual possession is universal, with many of the same symptoms appearing time and time again throughout many different cultures. One must begin to question why this is. And yet, in the case of the Yoshidas, what is perhaps most intriguing, and indeed different, is how the family went about exorcism. Unlike stories involving Christian counterparts, whilst there was priestly guidance, there was no overt intercession from an outside authority figure. The Yoshidas took this as a deeply personal and spiritual experience and managed it themselves. It transformed the family. The emotional baggage of their own and their ancestors' lives was confronted, and in the crucible, they forged a new identity for themselves. Years later, Mrs. Yoshida was considered a holy maternal figure in the area who would preside over the temple in an iconic pink kimono, raising her hands and administering light healing. To reach that point from a position of illness with evil-smelling pus coming from rashes all over her body as she is continually possessed by wrathful entities is inspiring. Thus, whilst the cause of the ailment is difficult to comprehend, this case gives a rare example of possession being not only cured, but transmuted into something beneficial. True spiritual alchemy. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to like and subscribe for more of the paranormal. Or why not visit me in person at Rowton's Museum of the Paranormal and Spirituality for one of our guided tours, seance evenings, or ghost hunts. And if you cannot wait until my next video, why not watch the one suggested on screen now? Until next time.